Do you have any sunglasses with you?
Maybe you should go get them. It would be way worth it. So, no, nobody
I like to wear short
Nobody will
sunglasses
care.
at night to
Nobody
come
will
in
care.
playing that song.
see you.
No, I'm not going to do that.
So just same scenario as last time. We're still not kicking in on our access channel, but we're streaming.
Okay.
So
Okay.
kind of
Hang on a second.
Oh, okay. We're just gonna wait for a minute. I think they're gonna come back.
She go?
I don't know if she needs to print something off, and she said wait.
Yeah, she said print something. She said
She needs to wait 1 minute.
Oh, okay.
Oh, got it. And we're still not streaming for some reason on the, not that anyone's watching.
Because we have a hot mic.
Oh.
Oh,
You did.
I just knew I'd be a little late.
That's okay, we're waiting on some technology. Great. All right, we're going to call tonight's study session in order. Joan, roll call, please.
Director Hackert?
Here.
Director Kelsenberg?
Here.
Director Petrie?
Here.
Director Porbeni?
Yep.
Director Riley?
Here.
Director Fatava?
Here.
Chair Sherman?
Here.
You have a quorum.
Great. Let's stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, we're going to approve tonight's agenda. I'll go ahead and make a motion to approve it. Can I get a second?
Second.
Great. Director Petrie seconds. All those in favor of approving tonight's agenda, raise your hand and say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. All right, our first agenda item is consent. And we are going to look at the payment of invoices from October 29th through November 11th. I'll go ahead and make the motion to approve.
I'll second.
Great. Director Hockert is the second. All those in favor of approving item A, payment of invoices, October 29th through November 11th, 2022, raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Great. So we're going to get into 3 topics for our study session today. I'm going to turn it over. The first presentation is Be Smart, and we'll turn over to Dr. Funk.
Erica, you ready? Okay, come on up. Erica Osterreich is here to talk about a program called Be Smart. As you're aware that, school violence is becoming more and more concerning throughout America. And Erica's part of a group called Be Smart that has a concept that can make a difference in securing guns at home, and she'll talk much more about it. So go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you.
You bet.
Thank you for inviting me here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So my name is Erica Astrike, and my 3 adult children all graduated from Stillwater schools. I grew up in Newtown, Connecticut, and my mom was a first grade teacher for decades at Sandy Hook School. So I have a painful connection to gun violence in my hometown, forever changed by the tragedy in December 2012. 6 years ago, I became an activist for gun violence prevention, and I'm here today to talk about the importance of keeping kids safe by educating adults on responsible gun storage. Be Smart is a program developed by Everytown for Gun Safety Support Fund to bring together parents and all adults concerned about kids, guns, and safety. During the presentation, I will mention handouts on the topics we're discussing. They can all be downloaded on our website, Be Smart for Kids, in both English and Spanish. I want you to know that I'm going to talk about the effects of gun violence on children. There are no pictures, but I'll talk about real-life stories and statistics that may be upsetting to some. So just a heads up on that. If you could click the play on this. This is Aaron Donald of the LA Rams talking about our program.
What's up? There it goes.
It's just really low for some reason.
Every year, hundreds of kids and young people die because they get a hold of guns. So many of these tragedies, suicides, unintentional shootings, even school shootings could be prevented. What can you do about it? It's simple. If you own a gun, lock it up. And encourage gun owners you know to do the same. Look, owning a gun is your right, but it's our responsibility to protect our kids and our communities. So please do your part. Be safe, be smart. We're in this together. Learn more about secure storage at besmartforkids.org.
Thank you. Yeah, if you could go ahead and proceed. So thank you for having me here today to talk about the life-saving message of secure gun storage. Be Smart is a 100% nonpartisan adult education program with the sole purpose of saving lives through secure firearm storage. Before we begin, let's agree on a few universal statements that are key to the Be Smart message. 1, we all want our kids to grow up happy and healthy. 2, we have the right to make responsible decisions about how to protect our homes, families, and communities, including whether or not to have a gun in our home. If we can prevent even one child gun death or injury, it's our responsibility to do so. So we're not here to talk about laws or policies. Let's set those to the side. It's a heartbreaking fact that in the U.S., firearms are now the leading cause of death for children. It's not motor vehicle accidents or cancer, it's bullets. This is a major national public health crisis. More than 1,800 children under the age of 18 are killed with guns every year. That's an average of 5 children every day. When children are killed with guns, the majority of those deaths, 54%, are homicides. That's 1,000 children per year. Also, nearly 700 children die by firearm suicide each year, and 100 are unintentionally shot and killed. It's devastating to everyone involved. We're here today to talk about how we can prevent tragedies like these from happening. Let's take a look at child gun death statistics in Minnesota. Guns are the second leading cause of death among children and teens. An average of 41 children and teens die by guns every year, and 57% of those deaths are suicides. The national average for that is 35%. In Minnesota, it's against the law to store or leave a loaded firearm where it should reasonably known that a child under age 18 is likely to gain access to it. Violation of this law is a gross misdemeanor. It's an important note. A shocking fact, 4.6 million children in the U.S. live in a household with at least one loaded, unlocked gun. Together, we can work to prevent your child from being one of them. While school shootings and mass shootings typically make national headlines, almost all child unintentional shooting deaths occur in the home. Since September 2017, there have been 223 unintentional shootings resulting in 98 deaths and 136 injuries. The Secret Service found that 3/4 of school shooters acquired their firearm from the home of a parent or close relative. As of September 2013, 140 shootings on school grounds have resulted in 46 deaths and 111 injuries. We all approach this issue from different perspectives. Many of you are parents, and some of you may be gun owners. You may have a personal experience with guns, and some of you may have even been impacted by gun violence. We believe that most gun owners want to be responsible, so we are here to talk today about what all of us, gun owners and non-gun owners alike, can do to make sure children and teens do not have unsupervised access to guns. On the next few slides, you'll see some headlines about child gun violence. Behind each headline are real lives that have been impacted, and we know that many of these incidents are not reported. Upper left. Most of us still remember the news in December 2021 of a 15-year-old Oxford High School student in Michigan who shot and killed 4 students and wounded several others. He was armed with a handgun recently purchased by his father. Upper right. In July of this year, a 3-year-old Pennsylvania boy shot himself with an unsecured loaded gun when he was left alone in a car. Lower left. This article talks about an incident at a South Carolina elementary school in May of this year. A loaded handgun was found in the backpack of a 7-year-old student. Lower right. This is about 2 teenage boys hospitalized in August after being shot in what investigators believe to be a murder-suicide attempt in Texas. And here are a few headlines about what the consequences of unsecured guns looks like here in Minnesota. Upper left, a 7-year-old boy in Plymouth was killed after he found a loaded unlocked gun in a box that contained a new hoverboard. Upper right, an 8-year-old girl died after accidentally shooting herself in Thief River Falls. Lower left, a 6-year-old boy fatally shot another child after unsupervised kids found a loaded gun in a home. Middle right, a 2-year-old boy found his father's gun in the bathroom and fatally shot himself in the head. Lower right, a boy unintentionally killed his 10-year-old brother after finding a gun under his dad's pillow. All of these stories show the consequences when young people get their hands on unsecured guns. No story is quite the same, but all are tragic and all are preventable. If you own a gun, lock it up. These are some recent school shootings that occurred on school campuses in Minnesota. Upper left, a 12-year-old boy fired shots in a hallway at Plymouth Middle School. He had found a gun in his father's bedroom. Upper right, a 15-year-old boy was killed and 2 other teens wounded when an argument escalated to gunfire at a Richfield Education Center. Lower left, a 19-year-old was shot and injured on the Augsburg University campus. Lower right, Mankato High School went into a soft lockdown after a juvenile male student attempted suicide by firearm. He sustained an injury and later died. A recent story on CNN reports that nationally there have been at least 53 school shootings at K-12 schools so far this year. That's more than all of 2021 and nearly double as many as 2018. A Pew Research Center survey just released in October found about a third of parents with children in K-12 schools said they were very or extremely worried about a shooting happening at their school. So what can we do about it? Adults need to take action and do better. Together we can learn to be smart by learning these 5 steps that could save a life. S, secure all guns in your home and vehicle. M, model responsible behavior. A, ask about unsecured guns in other homes. R, recognize the role of guns in suicide. And T, tell your peers to be smart. Let's start with the S, secure your guns in homes and vehicles. 13 million U.S. households with children contain at least 1 gun, and the majority of children in gun-owning households actually know where that gun is stored. Children should never be in the presence of unsecured guns. Remember, hiding a gun is not securing a gun. If you own one, you may think you've stored it in a great hiding spot, but we know that children can find anything and that they hear everything. You may have questions about what secure storage looks like. On this slide and the next are examples of storage options. All three of these storage options have a biometric lock, which uses a fingerprint to open it. Contrary to popular belief, locking up guns does not prevent owners from readily accessing them. This is a common myth that storage devices negate the self-defense purpose of owning a gun by putting time-consuming barriers between the gun owner and their means of defense. The reality is there are affordable options for secure gun storage that provide owners access in a matter of seconds. Unsecured guns actually increase the likelihood of crime and violence because of gun theft. Secure storage reduces the risk of firearm suicide and unintentional shootings, and it also helps prevent those thefts. Nationally, at least 2 guns are stolen every 15 minutes, and more than half of those are stolen from cars. Putting a gun under a seat or in the glove compartment is not secure storage. There are gun lock boxes specifically designed just for cars. And here are 3 additional storage options. We also have a handout on secure gun storage on our website. As a child ages and becomes more savvy, secure storage methods should also change. For example, a cable lock is appropriate for younger children and a lockbox for a teenager. You can also get a free gun lock through Big Waves, a nonprofit started by the parents of a young boy who was shot and killed in a road rage incident. Their mission is to get a cable lock into every home in the U.S., and the QR code there brings you to the site where you can sign up to get that free gun lock. Let's get to the M, model responsible behavior. Every law-abiding adult has the right to decide whether or not to have a gun in the home, but you can't rely on curious kids not to find it. Modeling responsible behavior means that smart adults make sure kids don't have the opportunity to access guns. Kids know where their parents store their guns, and more than 1/3 reported handling their parents' gun. 1/4 of parents did not even know their child had handled their gun at home. It's an adult's responsibility to prevent access to guns, not a curious child's responsibility to avoid them. Talk to your kids about gun safety, but remember, that's a precaution, not a guarantee. One study found that young children who go through a week-long gun safety training are just as likely as children with no training to approach or play with a handgun when they find it. Parents and caregivers should teach children not to touch a gun if they come across one, real or pretend, and alert an adult immediately. Make talks about gun safety a part of conversations with your kids, like other safety topics such as drugs and alcohol, talking to strangers, and being safe around swimming pools. We have a handout on our website about talking to children and teens about gun safety. In the U.S., there are approximately 4.6 million children living in a household with at least one loaded, unlocked gun. This is why you need to ask about firearms in other homes your child visits, the A in SMART. What are some things you might ask about before allowing your child to go to another home? It might be things like allergies, pets, swimming pools, car seats, supervision, TV and screen time, alcohol access. We want to make asking about unsecured guns as normal and natural as asking about any other safety issue. Don't wait until your child goes to another home to ask. Volunteer information about your home first. It's not about the presence of guns, it's about whether they are stored securely. If it seems awkward at first, try making it part of your general safety conversation by email or text. This slide is an example of how the question could be asked. It may not be your gun, but it could be your child. Let's talk about recognizing the role of guns in suicide, the R. Access to a gun can mean the difference between life and death. As your children get older, you may need to consider taking another look at your storage methods. If you've been using a simple cable lock, you may want to think about getting a gun safe. We all know how curious children can be, so as your children get older and more resourceful, you need to act accordingly. If you know a loved one is in distress, you might want to consider temporarily removing a gun from your home. It's important to consider that firearm suicide is uniquely lethal. 90% of suicide attempts with a gun end in death, a much higher fatality rate than any other means of self-harm. Half of all suicides in the U.S. are gun suicides, and many are unaware of the fact that 70% of people who survive a suicide attempt will never attempt suicide again. A staggering statistic, 41% of child suicides involve a gun. Secure your guns or get them out of your house. If you want to get them out of your house, what can you do? Local law enforcement may be willing to store guns for you, but you should call them ahead. Or you could temporarily store your guns at the home of a relative or friend. You should lock any guns you transfer and not provide the key code to manage their risk. In Minnesota, gun owners can make this type of transfer without a background check. As you can see in this graph, over the last decade, young people have the fastest growing firearm suicide rates of any age group. This is especially true for 10 to 14-year-old children. The CDC's National Youth Survey showed 20% of high school students had seriously considered attempting suicide within the last year. One study showed that 41% of adolescents in gun-owning households reported having easy access to the guns in their home. Data supports that secure firearm storage is associated with a decreased risk of child firearm suicide. It's critically important that we break the silence around suicide. Here are some signs to look for when you're concerned about a loved one who may be suicidal. And I'll just let you read those. We also have this information on our website as a handout if you want to get that information. You probably have it here at the district. Moving to the next, yes. So this is the new 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline that can be used by calling, texting, or emailing. And here are a few other resources to be aware of: the National Suicide Prevention Line, the Trevor Lifeline Project, and the Crisis Text Line. Additionally, if you are a survivor of gun violence, we can connect you to the Everytown Survivor Network. It's a national community of survivors working together to end gun violence. The Survivor Network connects survivors to each other, amplifies the power of survivor voices, offers trauma-informed programs, provides information on direct services, and supports survivors who choose to become advocates. All of the services they offer are free. That brings us to the T. Tell everyone you know to be smart. We need your voice and all voices to spread this message. These pictures show how we tell about our communities about the Be Smart campaign and Safe Gun Storage. In addition to presenting Be Smart, we educate at community events. We meet with community leaders, law enforcement, civic organizations, and faith-based organizations. We can all help save lives by spreading the Be Smart message. The Minnesota Be Smart team strives to increase our partner organizations. When partners endorse and promote Be Smart, it helps get this important message out within communities. Many volunteers throughout the state are working hard and having success to grow our partner organizations, and many more are coming soon. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate the opportunity to share this program with you. We are really having a lot of success especially now that we can actually meet with people and schools are back in session, et cetera, to talk to people about the importance of this program. And we have had a lot of success with police departments, the counties, school districts, and we would love to partner with our school district in pushing this out to families in our community. If anyone has any questions, I'm more than happy to do my best. Yes?
You know, I'm looking at the different partners you have, and very familiar. I mean, we even have the Stillwater Police on here. What does it entail to be a partner with your organization?
Well, partner is somebody who endorses the program and helps us get it out in the community, and that obviously means different things to the different organizations. In terms of school districts, some of the things that we've accomplished in other school districts are resolutions, where they're partnering with community health organizations and law enforcement together, and publicly state we're making this an important priority, and we're going to do all these things to get this message out. Other districts are doing it on their website. They're using social media to push it out, the student handbook. They ask us, and we're happy to come and table or attend events and present in any way, shape, or form. We have a pretty big team of volunteers. So it kind of just depends on what might be possible. We want to do as much as we can.
Okay, that
Yeah.
makes sense. Perfect. Yes, Director Riley.
I think you answered a lot of my question. I was just kind of wondering what it looked like, the involvement, whether it was something that was done through community ed or programming that way, or is, I mean, how do you, a lot of this seems like it's more, information on educating parents and older community members. So I didn't know how that looked like, what it looked like within the school.
Right.
If you were to
It
do-
isn't to the children. It's to the adults. Yeah, so school newsletter, website. There's so many places. And here's what I know, having talked to our Be Smart lead up in Duluth, because Duluth schools have done a ton. They are regularly pushing it out. It's not a one and done, because people won't see it. You just got to remind them. So, newsletters, social media posts. I mean, I could dig in and find out what other districts have done. But there's a lot of ways this could look. I hope that answers your question. And it's
Yeah.
to the parents, it's to the families.
Right.
And we also have, or I brought it with me, I must have left it over there. I have some flyers, and I'm happy to leave them with you, and some cards that just have the acronym and the details on it. So that's another way, just to have them. Like the police department partners that we have, including Washington County, Sheriff Starry, they give free gun locks and a Be Smart brochure with every person that's applying for a gun permit. So, that's a direct correlation there. And we're also talking to like Rasmussen College, their police officer training, to try to get this as part of their curriculum. So, but we're trying to just hit it from many angles.
Is
I
there
guess.
a cost to partner?
Nope.
No. Okay.
We're all volunteers.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you for that volunteer
Yes.
advocacy in the community. I mean, to me, this is just such a perfect opportunity for us to maybe share some information. And we've got Carissa here, who's great at figuring out the right ways to get this kind of common sense gun safety information out. And like you said, it's kind of nonpartisan, just promoting safety in general. So,
Thank you.
yes, Beth.
Thank you, Erica. Good presentation. I appreciate that. I went to a conference today, and one of the sessions that I was in was talking about mental health implications coming out of the pandemic for the last couple of years, and they were talking about the fact that teen suicide had gone up in that time frame by about 85%. And, as you noted in your presentation, if when guns are used in those sorts of attempts, they're almost always successful. And so I think that this comes at this issue in another way. Obviously, students and young people need mental health supports as well, but making it more difficult for them to, carry this out is probably an important thing. So I guess my question is, Dr. Funk, since you have brought Erica here tonight, it seems as though you feel as though this is information that we want to get out to parents, and I'm just wondering if you and Carissa have a plan about what this is going to look like.
Yeah, I think there's a couple thoughts here with that. So Erica and her team, we met a couple months ago, and she shared this information, and, we talked how to get this out. And, I think one of the things we should do is what we're doing tonight, is having a discussion with the school board. I also suggested that, this is a community issue. It's not just a school issue, it's a community issue. So my suggestion to the group was, wouldn't it be kind of great if the school board could do a resolution in support of Be Smart, if the city could do a resolution, because the police are already doing it, the county sheriff's department's doing it, so if the city and the county, and so we could really be a Be Smart, we want these weapons locked up to keep our kids safe. And again, I think I appreciate what you said about this is non-political. This is, yep, if you have a gun, great. You can have a gun at home, but we just want to make sure that it's secure so that our kids don't have access to it, because, unfortunately, having been an administrator since 2000, I have seen way too many deaths in schools, and too many of them are from guns. And I think whatever we can do to Well, the other pieces you mentioned this morning, Bev, at the seminar, the mental health of our students has been severely impacted by the pandemic, and what can we do? We have supports that we can try to put in place to help the kids, but we can also do some things proactively so they can't access the guns. So that's the thought on it.
Have you ever thought of partnering with like the various parent groups that are like support like the hockey team, support the baseball team? Just because those parents, they'll have meetings, and then it can be part of like just to get them more aware of like the resources and stuff. And then also, have you contacted like the Oakdale Gun Club and had them maybe get involved? Because obviously, they want to do gun safety
Sure.
also, stuff like that.
Now, we've talked PTOs, PTAs. We haven't talked specifics as far as the different activities. But those are certainly options available.
Absolutely, all good ideas, thank you.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but it would really start with a resolution supported by this board, and then it would go to someone like Carissa, yourself, to kind of implement it in a common sense way in our schools and with fellow partners in the community, like you mentioned, the cities and,
Correct.
okay. Does anyone want to talk about does anyone have any thoughts on a resolution or?
I'll jump in. I like the idea of having a resolution. I know that gun violence is something that, as a parent, is really scary these days, especially thinking about our kids going to school and everything we hear on the news, and being more aware of increase in suicides as well. Gun violence is a daily part of, unfortunately, our news cycle and our culture in America. And as a parent, it feels really scary, and this is a very clear tool and plan for things that we can do as parents to start the conversation, to actually do something that will hopefully protect our kids instead of mourn them.
Right, and of all the things you could be doing, this is probably the easiest. It's a PR campaign and educating adults. It's not difficult.
Director Riley?
I would support a resolution on this. Like you said, it's nonpartisan, and it's not about any gun rights and ownership of guns. It's just about being smart about how you handle your guns. I would also like to see a multifaceted approach to some of these problems in our schools, between the Be Smart, the drug abuse, and the mental health. I would love if we could explore a little bit more, because that's a huge issue, which I think does correlate with some of the gun issues and suicide.
I'm not hearing any objections, so we can get started on drafting a resolution to bring before the board. And yeah, absolutely. Thank you for bringing this information, and hopefully the people at home, we can start putting even your presentation out there as a first start to get that information out to parents. So
That would be awesome. Thank you so much.
great. Well, we'll be continuing these conversations. So
Yes.
thank you so much. All right. We're going to move on to action item, study session B, which is an enrollment update, and we're going to turn that over to Dr.
Do we have a resolution then?
We don't have one. We
You'll
don't
have
have it
one for
ready to go.
next
So
meeting or something.
We'll develop
We
it.
wanted to hear what your thoughts were, and then we will put something together.
Yep.
And we will go from there.
Great. Enrollment time.
So, what we are going to do today is I just want to back up a second. So the last couple months, or a couple meetings, you've heard us talking about curriculum and test scores. And this month, I'm just going to give you kind of a quick snapshot of where we are as a student body, little historical data on where we've trended over the last 5 years as a student body. And then in a meeting sometime in the next couple months, you are going to get some data on projections on where we think we're going as far as enrollment. And with that information, we will also provide you an update on buildings. And there's a little bit of building data in here, but I think these are all important factors as we move forward and start to develop a plan here in the next few months. So this is just kind of a current reality of where we're at here today. This is from October 3rd. This is important because that's October is the number we give to the state as far as our enrollment. As I mentioned to you, I think last meeting, our enrollment is up about 65 students from last year to this year. So that's a positive for us. A lot of school districts in the state are still not seeing their enrollments come back. So it's not up a lot, but it is still it's a positive trend. Next slide. So when we're looking at this slide here, is we're taking our October 1 enrollment, and we're looking at operational capacity of the buildings. This is, okay, what we can fit into a building we can jam a lot more kids in a building if we need to, but classrooms, students, that's percent capacity. Go ahead and go back there, Joan, of where we're at. So you can see Afton Lakeland's almost at full capacity. Anderson, Lake Elmo, again, is almost full capacity. And then Stillwater High School. And yes, Vivian.
Are we missing the Los Amigos program in here?
That they're within the Lake Elmo.
I thought, okay.
Yep. So we have some buildings that are, particularly in the southern part of the district, that are looking like they are nearing full capacity. You can see Brookview is at 87%. And Mark, help me out, is that with the addition? Yep. So even with the addition that we have at Brookview, we're still at, close to 90% there.
And Mark could probably speak to this too, but I guess I just want to comment because I did kind of listen to and sit on the boundary change committee. And so some of these were with intention, like Brookview is a little bit lower right now for the anticipated growth that's coming. So there's some reason behind these numbers being where they are at.
Yes. So anyhow, again, this is a snapshot in time as of a month ago. Demographic trends. This is interesting because, as you're probably all aware, I came from a district that saw significant change demographically in my time there. So I had the team go back and take a look at where we are and where we're going as far as demographic. And this has an impact, well, the next slide will, but has an impact on what we do as far as an education too. So you could see that not too much change in there's not a group that jumps out that has changed significantly over time here. Hispanic would be the largest one, I think, at 2.7% increase in that 5-year period. And then the other thing of note is your white student body went from 80.9, and they've dropped almost 5 points down to 76. But not a pickup in one area in particular. Now, this is an interesting slide from a couple different angles. Look at your national school lunch identification. This is free and reduced. And you see there's a significant jump there in 2022. That is because the government, the state of Minnesota, is now identifying kids differently for free and reduced. Used to be you had to turn in the paperwork and bring back a form. Now, if you're on the WIC program or receive some sort of other federal assistance, you're automatically identified. So that's actually it's a higher number, but the way it works with the federal and the state government, financially, that's a good news story for the school district, because the increase in that number increases our compensatory aid that we receive from the state of Minnesota, and increases our Title I dollars from the federal government. So, for example, the increase that we have there, Stillwater will receive about $1 million more in compensatory revenue from the state of Minnesota for the next school year because that number's increased that much. Tina.
Do the families now, are they utilizing their free lunch, or is it something?
Yeah, they can. I mean, they've been so they've been identified as, I'm not sure the mechanism on how they're informed, but I think through the government, they are told they qualify, and so then they can utilize
And
it.
they don't have to do anything extra at the school
Correct.
then? Okay.
So that's significant. The other thing that I want you to take a look at, well, there's actually all three lines here. English language learners. So we have gone from 2.4 to 3.6% EL population in that time frame. So with an increase in EL population, we need an increase in EL staffing. We also really don't have a district-level coordinator for EL in Stillwater, and I imagine those numbers are going to continue to go up. So Dawn Lewick has really taken EL, that's one of the areas she's, as the director of schools, it's one of the areas of her umbrella that she's taking over to really start to work with our EL teachers throughout the district to provide some focus in that area. And then the other thing there on that slide is special education. You're seeing those numbers continue to go up, and the trajectory there is continuing to go higher and higher. Two factors there. One, and Paul, you could probably help me out. 2016 or so, there was a significant shift in identification of early childhood students. So now we identify a lot more students in early childhood special education than we used to much earlier in my career. So we're seeing an increase there. And one of the concerns that I have long-term in education or special education is oftentimes kids get into special education, but districts historically do not do a really good job of dismissing the students once their needs have been met with their individual education plan. So oftentimes we have kids who stay on IEPs for a long time that don't necessarily need to. So we are seeing a significant increase within special education and within various programs within the district. Pete?
Is the, we're identifying more, but is the definition changing so that somebody that might not have been special ed 10 years ago now is?
Paul?
Well, I think what was being referenced was the Help Me Grow program. That was about 2016, where the referrals for early childhood birth to 3 would come in directly from hospitals and clinics and other organizations, and they come directly into the district, and then we do screening and referral process. So it's really, we're identifying more students in the birth to 3 and 3 to 5 range, the early childhood special education programming. We've seen, like, when we look at the numbers, there's a big increase starting. It's starting to level off a bit now, and that's probably why you're seeing a little bit of level off since 2000, from last year. But that's where it's identified. And then I think what Dr. Funk was referring to as well is, that means that more of those students are coming up in kindergarten, and then once they're in our services, it does become a little challenging to work, with parents to say that they no longer need special education programming, because it's, they like it, they support it, they think it's a safety net for their child. So it's an area that we can look at, but it's in that early identification of our really youngest students.
Okay.
So here's our students within the special ed site-based programs in the district. And CIP is our autistic program. Go ahead. So, as we increase special education numbers and as we increase English language learner numbers, oftentimes those are considered special services that we don't receive full funding for from the government. So we have what we call cross subsidies in place for both of those. And what a cross subsidy means is we're required to provide special education English language education for our students, but we're not necessarily funded from the government to do that. So one of the big pushes in the legislature this past year was to eliminate one or both of those cross subsidies. And I don't have the number for the special ed cross subsidy in front of me.
Yeah, it's 12.6 million.
So it's 12.6 million for Stillwater. So I think one of the things that we're going to see with the legislature coming forward here is an attempt to probably address that cross subsidy with at least special ed. And English language is typically, I think it's under $1 million what the cross subsidy is here in Stillwater. But either one of those would be helpful to the district from a financial angle. But we are going to continue to see more English language learners, and we are going to continue to see more special education students through the pipeline. So that's what I have tonight, subject to your questions.
I just have it's just, I want to be sure I understand it, because there's a lot of the acronyms, and especially just for the community
That's
too.
why Paul's here.
Exactly. The Rutherford is the DCD. Could you, just,
That's a developmental cognitive delays.
okay, that's what I thought, okay. And it's the emotional behavioral is the EBD.
Emotional and behavioral disorder program.
Okay, and then is the SMI the medical?
Yeah, we often refer to it as medically complex. For
Okay.
Students with multiple disabilities and needs, or most complex learners.
Okay. And so if you are throughout the district, just for you're getting transportation services to those areas. So for example, like Stillwater Middle School has most of those programs. Those students are coming throughout the district.
Yep.
Okay,
Yep. So they'd be IEP placed into those programs district-wide.
okay. Just so I had an understanding. Okay. Questions? Yes.
I'm going to throw one out that I have gotten a couple times recently. And actually, it goes back to the enrollment, looking at Stillwater Area High School. I didn't realize we were at 95% capacity in our high school. And this is a question that I get oftentimes from young parents is, at what point would we ever consider a second high school? Is that ever something that would be discussed, or kind of what process would that even go through? Or are enrollment trends not heading in the direction that would justify
See, that's
second high school?
that is a hot potato question.
Sorry, throwing it at you tonight.
And I'll share with you, you can go back a number of years to Shakopee. In Shakopee, enrollment was growing and growing, and they decided, we're going to go out and ask for 2 high schools. So they did. And the voters told the community what they thought. And Shakopee has 1 high school. You can look at Wayzata. Wayzata has 4,000 students in their high school. You can look at Minnetonka. Minnetonka has 3,000 plus students in their high school. So the question is, really, as representatives of the board, or of the community as board members, what do you value as a board? What does your community value? And do we, and it's, you have 2 different things going on here. I mean, one is, all right, if you graduate from Stillwater, you're a pony. All right, we build another high school. You graduate from Stillwater. Well, you're not a pony anymore. I mean, you're something else. So there's that historical piece of it, and there's the community aspect of it. But then there's programmatically. All right, I've talked to people who live in some of these big high school districts, and their kids are never going to see the floor for a football game or a basketball game because there's just too many other kids to compete with. And so, but if there's 2 high schools, there's less folks to compete with. But again, I think when we develop whatever your values are as a board, and you have those as something to help make make decisions, that's where it'll go. I can tell you one thing, Katie, that or Director Hocker tonight, that is a good thing. You're going to have Mark come up here in a minute and talk about the ALC, and we'll be able to pull the ALC out of the high school, hopefully, and then that'll provide some extra space. That is like I said, it's a loaded question.
Thanks. Yes, Director Riley.
So normally in November, we get the full breadth of our enrollment trends in history, and that isn't in this report. And so we are going to get the enrollment 15-year history like normal, all of the normal ins and outs of the schools and where they're going that we used to get as well.
We certainly could do that. What I've been waiting for is, our finance director starts on Monday, and then I'm going to sit down with the team and with her, let's go over where we are and where we're going, and I didn't want to do it twice. So that's why you've got a snapshot tonight of where we're currently at.
Okay.
So we certainly could.
Okay, I know, because, I mean, we've been doing this since early 2000s, if not before, like the enrollment trends, like our capacities. I just think it's very valuable information for us to see. It's an understanding as to where kids are going, where they're coming in from, and what challenges we have as a board when you set your goals, how we can message and where we need to, when they're coming out of, or in from St. Paul into Lake Elmo, or if they're leaving Stonebridge, to go to St. Croix Catholic, or it kind of gives you a better understanding.
Okay.
Yes, Director Petrie.
Yes, I actually agree with Director Riley that this gives us some really good detailed information about where our students are in our schools right now. But I think it's also important for us to have a historical look at enrollment and to see where we've come from and what those trends might be. So at some point, if we can get that, I would really appreciate it. And just for also historical perspective, when they got ready to decide whether there was going to be one high school in the district or two high schools in the district, the community came down, and Carissa will probably confirm this, on one high school, and it's one of the reasons why our ponies are dominant in sports today. That was a big factor in the community and what they decided they wanted. I don't know what they would say today, but that was kind of what a driving factor was back when it was time to decide whether it was one school or two.
And I think now you've added on to the high school and you've made it kind of large. So, yeah. Director.
One thing I guess you could do instead of building another high school, if you had way too many kids, is you could build another middle school, but bring the ninth graders back to the middle school so that you'd have the room in the high school. If you had, if people, it's kind of going backwards, but on the other hand, it just depends on how dire the situation is too.
A number of, pre-COVID, it was probably 2019, I visited a school in Denver, or district in Denver, that did a little something different. They had basically they created a science technology, like a pathways school. And so it became it was on a separate campus, but kids could go there, they'd still be part of the main high school, but that's a different way of, when you're talking space and maintaining one school, that's a different way of doing it. And again, I think Pathways is a great opportunity in our district that we're just on the front end of exploring. So that's just something else to consider.
That's a sore subject.
And something the community supports and
I don't know.
I brought it up.
One thing, and I know, Mark, this is probably because it predates Dr. Funk. I just am curious, when you look at the enrollment numbers, just having led the boundary changes, how is this kind of what you expected? It seems in line with what was expected. Are you looking at the middle schools? We opted not to trigger any boundary changes in the middle schools. are you okay with where we're at right now? And okay. Okay. So I think that those were, I want to say thank you, because I do think it kind of netted out as I'm looking at them. I don't have my handy, boundary change binder, but I think as I'm looking at this, the execution was kind of right where you thought it would be, and John Perry too, if he's here. But
So back to the future discussion. I think one of the things, the intent is to show you, all right, where we think students are going to trend within the district moving forward here. But we can certainly incorporate some of the historical data in there. It sounds like some of you are interested in that, so we can certainly take a look at that as well as we go forward here.
And I think I do know that document, that kind of huge document that has been traditionally shared. And I don't see anything wrong with sharing that with the board. I think that from my perspective, I always struggle with, okay, now what do we do with that information? I mean, I would like to see our staff digest that for us. I mean, certainly we're all free to look at it, and it's a curiosity factor of who's going where and when and what's up and what's down. But I always want to make it where, how is this data relevant to the decisions that we're going to be coming before the board as well? And so I think that, I always think that you could probably provide some insight on that too.
That would be the intent, is really, okay, what are the trend data and implications of having done whatever happened here, and how can we take that information as we move forward to make recommendations to you?
Exactly. Thank you. That would be great. Great.
And where
Yes,
houses
Director.
are being built.
Yes, which you're in.
That's really part of what this
Yeah.
is.
It's really overlaying all of these things once you get them, and to create a full picture. So, great. Thank you. I think we can move on to our third study item, which is Oak Park Learning Center and the ALC.
Good evening, Chair Sherman, members of the board, Superintendent Funk. Thank you for letting us come here and talk about the potential move of the Alternative Learning Center, or otherwise known as the ALC, which will kind of be referred to from here on out, of the potential move here to Oak Park. Currently, the ALC is housed at the Stillwater Area High School, which was talked about earlier. I'd first like to welcome some guests here. John Hunick from Krause Anderson will here to help answer questions at the end, and then Paul Aplikowski and Val Peterson from Wold, our architects, will be here to answer questions as well, and then Paul Lee will kind of take a couple slides as we go. Before we jump into the first slides, like I've said many times here at the board level, facilities follow programming. And so last school year, we had 4 presentations at different points, starting in December, kind of going through March, about what does the Oak Park Learning Center look like? And it's kind of looking in different phases. So the first phase that we approved last year is keeping bridge transitions here, and we started construction here this fall, and that will be done around spring break time here at the end of March. And now we're kind of looking at the second phase of moving the ALC from the high school here to Oak Park. So the first slide here is just kind of a summary of programmatically. So if you remember back to presentations, the first presentation we had was all programmatically. We had staff from Bridge Transitions talk about why programmatically it makes sense to have bridge transitions here at Oak Park. We had staff from the ALC here to talk about programmatically why the ALC is here, and then once it programmatically makes sense, then we'll talk facilities and costs and those sorts of things. So Paul, I just want to kind of highlight
Yeah, just historically, and I think we've discussed this before, and I think in December of last year we did as well. But as you recall, the ALC was at one point, and historically, was not at the high school. It was in a separate site, and that's more typical in a school district. When we did the addition to the high school, we moved the program into that space, and the space there is not. It's not big enough for the program, and it has a lot of limitations. And over time, although there's some positives for it to be at the high school, over time when we were talking with students and the programming, they really felt it was important to be in a separate site to meet their educational needs for those students. So that's just a little bit of a kind of reminder of kind of the background and why we're here now.
So this is kind of a satellite view of the Oak Park facility. You can kind of see the first rectangle on top is where the bridge transitions will live. That was approved last January, and construction started and will be completed at the end of March. The triangle on the bottom is where the where the ALC would be housed. And then pending board approval here at the end of November, we would begin work next fall, similar to kind of a timeline we have here for transitions, but we'd start next fall again with a next spring completion of the spring of '24. We'd be looking at completion from there. As we get inside the building, here's kind of a map of what is going to be done. If you look at the beige or the tan and the top is the transitions, that was what approved before, and that's what's being constructed and working on as we speak. Then we took at the green spaces, that would be accompanied here with the ALC and shared spaces. So we'd be remodeling, doing some updates to the gymnasium there, that top green. Looking on the left would be updating the kitchen and the cafeteria and making that a full functioning kitchen. So we would put the equipment back. All the equipment is not here anymore, so it'd be putting equipment back in the kitchen, and we'll be running a full kitchen staff of 2, maybe 3 individuals. We'll kind of have to work that out in terms of number of meals served, but we would run both breakfast and lunch here from Oak Park. Currently, our transition students get their meals from Stillwater Middle, so they call into Stillwater Middle each day, and then there's a shuttle between Stillwater Middle here for their lunch. But once ALC comes, we'd open up that kitchen again. So that green is kind of remodeling the kitchen as well as the cafeteria spaces there in the upper left. Looking at the bottom there in the green, which we'll get more in the next slide, is the ALC and what that remodeled space looks like, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time in there. But the part on the left here, which is this room right here, the professional development room, and the mechanical room, it's part of the long-term facility maintenance project of last year. Last summer that was approved is updating the boiler and then the water. And so when you're doing that and you're up on the ceilings and you're taking ceilings down to do the water and do the boiler area, it's all it is redoing the ceilings and lights here of this space and the mechanical space as well. So it's not totally remodeling this room, but the reason it's in green is there will be ceiling and light repair once you do the boiler and water project at the same time. On the next slide now is when we get a little more specific. Now, I just want to remind you this is the same process as we use for transitions. This is kind of the concept. This is not the final drawing. Similarly, when we came in January with the transitions, we had an image similar to this to meet the needs of transitions. Then we go through user groups where the ALC in partnership with Wold and Kraus-Anders will kind of dig into the details and figure out this is what we want. This is kind of a 90% of what it looks like, but there may be some tweaks before we go out for bid. And so if you remember last July, we came back to the board with a full updated model of what this looks like to say, hey, here's what it looks like. This is what we're going out for bid. And then we came back with the bids after that. So this is kind of conceptual what it would look like. There's 5 classrooms or learning space. So I'll kind of start in the upper right-hand corner. And those 2 green areas, the green is kind of flex spaces where sometimes there's an operable wall possibly, or some open area. So the top 2 classrooms on the right in the green space, then you come down to the entry, the vestibule, kind of the office reception area there in the tan and the brown area. Then you see 3 classrooms in blue there on the right side, and then on the bottom, that's 2 double classes, which currently has an operable wall, which we could potentially keep or move or kind of see what we want to do with that. And then kind of going down the left side is the restrooms, office spaces for the staff there, and then some small group and conference rooms there. Each of the black dots kind of represent students. So it's kind of look at where students could live or work and how that looks like. And then the arrows kind of going back and forth are supervision type of sight lines and kind of movement in and out of those individual spaces. So again, this is just kind of a concept, but you can get an idea of what that potentially could look like if this gets approved here at the end of the month. Next is now looking at the budget. We're looking at about a $6.8 million budget. There has been some increase in costs when you look at inflation, and you also look at the current bid market that we've had with not only our bids, but bids across the state that Wold and Kraus-Anderson has been a part of. And there will be 2 different funding sources. So some of this would be come out of our capital budget, and some will be come out of long-term facility maintenance. And so some of the long-term facility maintenance will be things that we can replace like for like, and then some of the things if we're adding new or replacing walls or those sorts of things that doesn't fit under the long-term facility maintenance program, that would come out of our operating capital budget. So that's kind of why there's 2 different funds here based on the trades and the work scopes that are in the individual project of where that fits between long-term facility maintenance and capital budget. Also, I do want to note that just for economy of size and scale here, that the water and boiler project, which I talked to you about before, which we approved last summer, we would include in these bids. So we're going here to approve the 6.8 for the ALC, but when bids come around, we'd be looking at a $9.8 million bid because we'd be taking the water project and the boiler project of updating the boiler and the water throughout the entire building. We'd include that into this bid, just so you get a better bid market with a higher scale and hopefully better bids when you combine those two projects versus doing them separately. So I just want to note that when bids come through, that we'd be looking at the $9.8 million number, not the 6.8. And then lastly, as we talk about bids, we'd be breaking this project into two bid packages or work scopes. So the first bid package would kind of start next summer, so the summer of '23. Looking at the site work. The site work would be adding a parking lot on the south side of the building for ALC, so we want to get that done over the summer. So as we do construction over the fall and the winter, obviously we can't do any of that site work outside. And then start some of the water and boiler replacements for some of those areas that are outside the boiler room, start with some of the ceilings and those sorts of things, and then finish that in bid package 2 when we start to do the internal ALC spaces. So that's kind of a high overview of not only programmatically what happened last year in our conversations, but just kind of what that space could potentially look like and some of the funding sources here for the ALC. So kind of at this time, I'll stop and open it up to any questions or comments that you may have.
And I just wanted to really quick, because I didn't properly maybe set this up for the community who may not remember. I mean, we did have several conversations last winter and spring, and we had, as a board, although the need is there, and we know that our ALC students aren't being properly served in the high school like maybe the intent was to, and so the pause was made by the board at that time because of some financial instability, some advice that we were getting just with the transportation and just kind of let things level out. We were also in a superintendent search, and so certainly wanted to get that permanent superintendent time to evaluate the programming needs and the budgets and make sure that we were feeling solid in making this move. So that's sort of where we paused it. We talked a lot last time about some of the costs, and it was a pretty neutral cost to the operating budget. And those are the things. So today we're just kind of talking about the physical structure and those different budgets that we're pulling from. So I just wanted to, for the community, it's certainly not, and for the board, it's not the first time it's come up, but that's the historical context of why we're still here today. So, yes, Director Petrie.
So when would, according to the schedule, when would the students arrive at the ALC if we go forward with this?
It's kind of twofold. That's kind of a conversation we need to have with the ALC. Kind of right now in the timeline, we'd be done around spring break, so you'd be looking at a potential fourth quarter move would be the earliest of next year. Or do you want to just wait and do the following school year? There's not a rush at the high school, and so kind of be talking with Rob, talking with Mary, and seeing what makes sense for a transition. So we're kind of looking to be done at the end of third quarter around spring break, and then maybe doing a spring or looking at the following school year.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
Director Vodova?
I guess I have 3 questions about this. One is, are you thinking, I guess just things to think about, I guess, we've learned a lot with the whole COVID fiasco about ventilation and making sure like the ventilation systems are up. So I would hope that the bid would include what we've learned from the high school about like making sure if something happens again that we can easily have a healthy environment inside. And then number 2, I would hope also that we could have Xcel Energy audit the building and actually, because it costs like $500 to have Xcel Energy audit the building, but they've shown that it saves between 5 and 15% in energy costs if you do what they're suggesting. And it would be nice if we audited the building and then implemented some of those things as part of the package. So that's another thing. And then my other question is, how are the kids going to use like the facilities for shop and art and stuff if they're here? Is there going to be some way, you wouldn't really want to double everything, but are they going to like ferry back and forth for those types of classes? And I guess there's a fourth thing, is that kitchen environment for that's closer to the transitions program. Will the transitions kids get to learn from the cafeteria that we
Yeah,
have.
That's something we can do. The two kitchens have to be different. So the food service kitchen is very strict guidelines with the FDA. So there's kids that can't be in that kitchen there in terms of the way that needs to be run. But in terms of doing some partnerships, we can definitely look at having some of our staff move into the transitions kitchen and do some of that assistance and partnership, absolutely.
Or even jobs. Like, I mean, once a kid's a certain age, right, then they could have
So
a
now
job
that,
there.
now that you say that, we're actually in conversations this fall with our bridge transitions here, as well as the transitions at the high school about creating jobs for our kids. So instead of work study, of kind of going to a local restaurant and working there, we're actually setting up a system as we speak and of our kids to apply for positions in our kitchens here at our secondary building. So we actually have the applications online right now. We've had our first students apply this week. So we're setting up interviews for our students to work in our buildings versus going to other schools. So thank you for that segue.
Just before we get into the next question, she had a lot of questions in there, and I didn't know if anyone wants to comment, or maybe we're already factoring in some of these things, but I think ventilation and energy audits for cost savings, is that a part of what you're already doing, or is that something we need to consider?
Not sure if my mic is working.
Oh.
Why don't you try it, Bill?
It's on.
Okay, thanks. We certainly look at energy efficiency. Everybody wants to save energy and certainly save the money that goes with it. So we would begin by doing that. We typically design buildings in conjunction with Hallberg, who has worked in the district for a long time, to far exceed code minimums. Excel does have programs that they work with larger buildings, and we'd be happy to submit with them and see if they would take you into that program. It's a little bit different than the residential one, but we've done that many times, so we would look into that with them.
Okay.
And then, of course, we would design in all the latest ideas about air filtration and purification and air movement to make sure that's a safe environment.
And then she had a couple, so I just want to make sure that all her questions get addressed. I think this one would probably go to Dr. Funk, but the programming exchanges between the high school and
Yeah,
here.
that'd be something that would be worked out between the high school administration and the ALC.
I did have one other thing to say.
On your HVAC, we had just actually replaced the HVAC in this building right before it closed.
Yeah, so that's probably already been accounted for.
I just want to say that it will be really nice for the board, if they're meeting here, to not be freezing in the winter.
And Director Kelsenberg?
Yeah, looking at the picture that had what's going to go on with the green and the blues right there, you have the entry in the back, and my perspective is right, that's that way, right? Which is the old elementary school here that was just going out to the playground. So what's going to happen on the outside of the building with parking and access?
So this is just a rough site map. We have to work with city and permitting and those sorts of things. But if you look on the south side of the building or just below that bottom rectangle, you can see the addition of a parking lot there. And so we need to work with code in terms of the number of stalls and those sorts of things, vert, city code and those sorts of things. But we would be adding a parking lot on the south for the ALC parking. And then when they park on the bottom, we also need to create a bus loop as well for students that ride the bus of pick up and drop off. So that's it's just a concept. We need to do some further work on that. But as they park or get dropped off on the bus, then they'd go in on the right or kind of the east side there into the entrance. So on the northern end, you'd have an entrance for our transitions program. The southern end, you'd have an entrance for our ALC students, and if we ever get down the road of additional programming, we could use the main entrance for additional programming, whether that's adults or professional development with our staff or whatever that looks like.
And is that calculated into the prices that we see?
Yes, that's part of the site work. The package number one, the site work, that's included in that, correct.
Was that your question, Director Riley?
It was.
Okay, great. My question is kind of why we all put this on pause, and I want to hear from our new superintendent. One, do you support this move programmatically? And then two, how does our finance department feel and our operations group feel about the costs involved? I mean, certainly I know we have, this is something that the community has supported in their planning process, and then we have our funding, or how are we looking?
So you have heard me say this before, Chair Sherman, and not everybody has, but it sounds goofy, but I like to make this statement that there's nothing alternative about an alternative high school located in a high school. Okay? There's not. And our alternative high school students need a different system for them to be successful. And when we're in a school where we have the same school bell, we have the same school schedule, we do the same thing that the high school does, we just maybe have a little different, some different teachers and some other things programmatically, it's really not significantly different. And so I think you have an opportunity here to take our kids and put them in their own environment here, which is a positive. But I also think it's a positive for the area. I mean, you talk about growth potential. This could be a really thriving place for our ALC students. And, I think that historically, unfortunately, the alternative programs are oftentimes an afterthought, or how can we do it on the cheap? And all of our kids deserve the best. And we have a school facility here that would fit the needs of those students with some potential opportunities upstairs to grow in the future if we needed to. So absolutely, I think the sooner we can do this for the kids' sake, the better it will be. And then from a financial and operational perspective, I think what you're seeing is continuing costs going up and up and up. And we can continue to study this and delay the decision, but I think there's a cost that goes along with that fiscally. Whether or not we can afford it, absolutely. I think the nice part about this is we're using capital dollars and long-term facilities maintenance revenue. So we are not tapping into having to go to the voters and say, hey, we want you to, we need a bond so we can move our ALC students. This is capital money that we already have within our reserves, so we can do that piece of it. The third piece is, we talk about the boiler and the water. That's going to have to get done. So let's do it, and let's do it with the ALC and get it done. So I'm 100% behind it.
Thank you very much. Director Petrie.
So we we discussed this during the Finance and Operations Committee meeting, and we talked there a little bit about the impact of inflation on this project, because this is a project that won't be completed for another 18 months. And so I just, for the benefit of the rest of the board and the community, can you just talk a little bit about the impact of inflation on this project?
Sure.
Maybe that's you, John.
Yeah, thank you. Unfortunately, we've been talking about inflation for our clients from Minot, North Dakota to Ladysmith, Wisconsin. So it's real. Maybe a little bit of history, what's happened in the last year. We've all noticed it when we go to the store, to Menards, but I do have a couple reports in front of me. One's ENR, Engineer News Record Report. It's a national report. And from July of last year to July of this year, a national inflation is about 18.9%. And being at Carl Sanderson now for 28 years, never seen anything half that. So it's a new world for all of us. All districts are dealing with it. The AGC, the local chapter here, from January of 21 till now is a 23.9% inflation. So yes, it's real. The question is, what's it doing forward, right? Is it slowing down a little? Yes, hopefully back to normal soon. But, we have projected, more than normal, whether it's another 10, 12, 15% in our estimates that Mark showed you. You've heard me say this a dozen times, you hear me say it a dozen times again. We look into our smoky crystal ball on what bids are on bid day. We don't want to be too conservative because that can hurt the design of the project. So we are planning for inflation for the bid dates that Mark showed you.
I think one important consideration is timing of the project.
That's a good point.
And we're not doing this in the summer when we're competing with everybody. And so I think the timing of it should help out the cost as well.
that works out great, and having an empty building and letting contractors work during the winter months. Normally, we have the summer slams. People are busy, and people are busy, bids tend to go up. So it's a good point, Dr. Funk. So.
Yes, Director Hocker. Going back to Dr. Funk's comments about the necessity for moving the ALC into this facility, which I very much understand and support. I also just want to ensure that the services that are shared between the ALC and the high school, like counselors, nurses, those kind of things, how will those be addressed in this building? Will they get the same amount of kind of wraparound services that they have been getting up to this point? Or how will that be factored into the budget going forward?
You know, I think it's interesting. I had a conversation with the transitions staff a week or so ago, and they talked about how previously in their history they had been co-located with the ALC somewhere else in the district, and how they were looking forward to being co-located with the ALC again because there's potential for counselors, social workers that they currently don't have over here, but when they're by themselves. So I think what that looks like and what the shift will be from the high school it remains to be seen. But I can tell you that I think there's some efficiencies of having two programs like of high school students here in the building that we would be receiving support from. I think nursing services would not necessarily be here full-time, but we would have access to nursing. But I would imagine a full-time social worker in this building to work with the needs of the students. Secretarial support, right now, Paul, the special ed department is basically running the administrative support for this building. And when the ALC comes over here, they will bring their administrative support that they have with them. So I think that will be a operational boon for the building as well. So I see it as a win for both ALC and transitions from them coming over here. As far as specifics, I think those still have to be worked out yet, but we will provide the supports for those students that they can be successful.
Thank you.
Yep.
Yes, Director Kelsenberg.
If Annette Salmon was here, I'd be asking her this question. Maybe somebody else could ask. But once we do up this building, it's going to be a lot nicer. There might be some community use of the building. Looking at there's a gym that could be used, the Maker Lab perhaps. So is there going to be a call for community use of the building afterwards?
Yep.
That we would be able to accommodate?
Yep.
Okay.
Especially the gym. And once if this project gets done and the ALC gets done, then we can be able to rent the gym out, nights, weekends for basketball, ballroom dance, whatever.
Great.
I seem to remember in the original plan, like from a year ago, there was also like community ed space or something, right? Is that part of this, or is that going to be a third phase?
We are not doing any construction for community ed space at this time. There will be space there that we could look at.
But that
community ed
was part of
programming.
it, wasn't that part of the
That
original
was part of the
plan?
original. This is now just looking at student programming.
Okay.
So it's looking at just the transitions, now the ALC, and then the next step is what we look at for potential.
Afterwards, yeah.
Correct.
But the gym space could be utilized immediately for programming.
During the school day, it'll be used for transition students and ALC,
right.
but nights and weekends, we could use for community.
programming.
Correct.
Okay. Yes, and I should be clear too, this is not the second floor. This does not touch the second floor. So for the community I don't think we ever really put the second floor on this project ever, but just to be clear with the community. Yes, Director Kelsenberg.
Now that you said that, so if you're doing all this work below, is that second floor just going to be left alone? Or, once you're in there, you're kind of improving with plumbing and wiring and everything?
So we'll do the water and the boiler and stuff up to the second floor, but in terms of remodeling any of those spaces, in terms of updating classrooms or putting offices or any of that, that's not part of this project. But we'll be doing some with the water and plumbing part, the boiler project, yes.
One of the considerations is we want to be fiscally responsible to meet the needs of our students. Now, we have talked about potentially, we could put some offices up on the second floor if we needed to. But I can't financially recommend that. That would be significant it's highly, like millions of dollars more to get the second level done.
Okay.
For office space, I can't recommend that.
Sure.
Great. Okay, so if you have any questions, you can always send those to Dr. Funk between now and our next meeting, and he'll get you those answers. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you for coming out. All right, that's all we have for our study session this evening, and with that, we're adjourned. Thank you.